Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Opposite of Cheating podcast. This is episode 52. I'm Tricia Bertram-Gallant, one of your hosts, and I'm here today with two of our Irish colleagues, Mary Claire Kennedy and Justin Tonra, who are going to talk to us both about what's happening at a collective national level in Ireland, as well as how that's influencing the individual level at literally both the individual institutional level and maybe people within the institutions. And so just want to say thank you and welcome to both of you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much,
having
Tricia.
us.
Lovely to be here.
And so that was a little bit of introduction. Really, I want people to get to know you. So please tell us a little bit more about what you do and in what context. And Mary Claire, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Tricia. So, my name is Mary Claire Kennedy. I am the academic integrity lead in a university in the west of Ireland called the University of Limerick. And that's kind of a mid-sized university in the Irish context, about 18,000 students, 2,000 staff members. But last year I was appointed chair of the National Academic Integrity Network, and I'm sure we'll discuss that and their work in much more detail during the course of our conversation today. But so I kind of tie both my roles together, kind of stewarding the national network forward with the able assistant of Justin as my deputy chair. I'm a pharmacist by training, and I kind of have navigated my way from, I suppose, the clinical work area through to a lecturer in pharmacy through to my current role. So that'll probably influence some of my comments today or my observations as
Yeah,
well. So
I
thank you.
bet. And is the academic integrity lead a full-time position?
It's a full-time position, yes, and unfortunately I have a small team, so myself and two educational developers. I suppose the institution were externally funded by the Higher Education Authority in Ireland, which is kind of like essentially like a regulatory function. But they also have a stream around educational support and development. And it was really, I suppose, to up our game nationally, but institutionally as well around academic integrity. So very fortunate to have kind of been able to secure that role and bring my expertise, which I brought from the UK, into that position.
That's amazing. Okay, folks, we're going to talk about how the reason why I love talking to folks in Ireland and Australia and New Zealand is because of their national approaches and their just amazing support for academic integrity, which we do not see here on the North American side, Canada, US, or Mexico at the national level. So we're going to soak all of this in today and get some ideas for what we should all be doing. And Justin, tell us a little bit more about what you do and what context.
So my name is Justin Tonra, and I hold the equivalent position to Mary Claire's in the University of Galway. So I'm the academic integrity officer there.
Mm.
And the University of Galway is similar size to the University of Limerick. We have just over 20,000 students and just over 2,000 staff. We're also on the west coast, about an hour north of Limerick. So Mary Claire and I like to represent the west coast,
Nice.
like you as well,
Yes.
Tricia.
Yes.
And so my background is in English literature. I hold an associate professorship in the English department here in Galway as well. So in my role, I'm currently on a secondment from that
Okay.
position to the academic integrity office here, which is it's called an office, but it's me and one other person,
Yep.
my colleague Michael Coyne, whose title is Academic Integrity Support Officer. But we have I guess, a network of other people across the university working in academic integrity that I can talk about in a bit more detail later. But I also am involved in the National Academic Integrity Network, as Mary Claire
Mhm.
said. I'm the deputy chair there and on the steering committee. So through that, I get to see and hear and learn about lots of interesting, different approaches to academic integrity issues across the country.
Yeah. And thank you for that. And the National Academic Integrity Network, it's not like our International Center for Academic Integrity here, which is a separate nonprofit. It is under the quality assurance body, correct? For Ireland?
Yeah, it sits under Quality and Qualifications Ireland, which is the
Yeah.
quality assurance body
Okay.
for higher education institutions and further education training bodies in Ireland as well. But I suppose they very much offer administrative support, kind of oversight and steerage, but they don't influence, I suppose, our agenda or our strategy overly. That really will come from the bottom up, I suppose.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, you all are, so people from the different universities are leading things and they support you.
Yes,
That's
exactly. Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so that leads us to you both came to this work like many people from the academic world, very different pharmacy and English, right? So what is your first kind of cognitive remembrance of academic integrity? And people struggle with this. Some people go all the way back to like fourth grade. Other people be like the first time they taught, of course, and someone cheated in their class. So like, what was it for you, Mary Claire? What was the first time you think you became cognizant of this idea of academic integrity?
Well, that's so interesting. And I kind of, I've been listening to your podcast avidly for quite a while now. And I kind of noticed this conflict that other individuals discuss about the differentiation between cheating and integrity.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something that rings true to me as well. I suppose, definitely right back to my elementary education or my primary school education, this idea of being honest, being truthful, being, owning your work. And that was actually something my mother was very hot on as well, about telling the truth and standing over what you do. And so I suppose it came from schooling, and there was always, within our state examinations system as well, as we move on through the schooling system, you would always hear rumors about what happened to somebody who cheated. So, but then I suppose really it came into my kind of more formally as I've moved through my own undergraduate education. And this is something that I think will crop up again and again for me as I discuss kind of my emergence into this role. In healthcare, there is a kind of an implicitness about how one conducts oneself, and a duty of candor and a duty of truthfulness and a code of conduct alongside things like integrity, not cheating, those kind of things. And so picking it apart actually is really difficult to do. So certainly any mention of things like plagiarism or cheating in my undergraduate degree was then heavily influenced with a further conversation about conduct.
Yes.
So then when I moved into my, having completed my PhD, I moved to the UK, to university there. And I was kind of, my services were offered that were for something we called the plagiarism committee in a school of healthcare there. Which was a wonderful experience. I was a new academic. I kind of needed some scholarship and service activity. This was interesting. It was kind of in a more nurturing environment. There was other members on a committee. I could learn quite a bit. And that was 2015. And I eventually became chair of that committee after quite a while. So for context, out of a school of probably 5,000 students, we would hear 4 or 5 cases a month. And that was in an era where we called it plagiarism. There were other activities, particularly during COVID. It would be other activities as well. But I think really, and then I suppose it's only that now in my current role and moving back to Ireland into my academic integrity role, that's where we change the name. And I think maybe there is maybe a sophistication or more of an insight, led by that kind of shifting towards a truthfulness or an integrity, a positive language. But I have to say, in my conversations with students, particularly from a healthcare background over the years, what was implied in the conversation was integrity. It was about owning one's own misconduct or kind of seeking or behaviors that would be less desirable, even though that maybe was not what it was called. So I think it's always been out there, but maybe now just formally the conversation has changed a bit elsewhere with other disciplines as well as we engage with those students.
Yeah, I was always I was always fascinated by, I would say, England and Ireland's obsession with plagiarism in the early 2000s and into the teens. Like everything was plagiarism, right? And we talk about that. Actually, I have a book coming out with Mary Davis, who you probably both know, maybe from England, and Zenith Khan from UAE. We have another book coming out this year. And we talk about that a little bit when we talk about the history of academic integrity, that there was this kind of almost obsession with plagiarism at a time.
And I think it's nearly used as a shorthand. People call it plagiarism, but it's nearly every other type of behavior. And it's in the absence of having language oneself to
Yeah.
call out what the conduct
Yeah.
is. Yeah, I think it's maybe just a lack of awareness,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. So much has changed, and now you all are just leading in this academic integrity movement, as far as I'm concerned. Justin, what's your first memory or becoming cognizant of this idea?
I mean, it's really interesting to hear Mary Claire's because I took a similarly long historical view, well, in my lifetime of this question when I was thinking about it. So when I was in elementary education as well, primary school, both of my parents were teachers, so
Ah.
I was very aware of, the principle, the
Yeah.
positive principles of education. So when your parents are teachers, I think
They
there's
were
an
teachers,
an
primary
even
teachers?
greater, they were primary
Okay.
teachers. Yeah, there's an even greater moral and ethical imperative not to cheat
Yeah.
there as well. Um, then I thought about my own undergraduate education, just like
Mhm.
Mary Claire's, and since coming into this role in a more professional capacity, I've often thought back to instances of misconduct that I would
Yeah.
have encountered back then. None my own, of course. I'm a
No.
shining beacon of academic integrity, but I do think of colleagues who or fellow students who were running late on assignments and
Mhm.
occasionally stealing a book from the library that was not a book that was allowed to be borrowed, only
Yeah.
to return it later. Other examples, like this. And so while in studying English literature and philosophy, there isn't the same kind of professional accreditation, fitness to
Mhm.
practice concerns that Mary Claire would have thought about, foremost of her mind. There was still, this very clear understanding about what was right and what was not right.
Wow.
Um, so then, I guess moving into my professional life, um, I first really worked in this area more than 10 years ago when I was a year ahead for the undergraduate degree in
Mhm.
English here at Galway. So
Mhm.
we tend to have heads of years and they have a lot of responsibilities, one of which is to do, or was at that time, to do with plagiarism.
Ah.
And the university's policy at that time was, as you have identified, solely focused on plagiarism. So it was the university's policy for dealing with suspected instances of plagiarism.
Mhm.
And so that was the only game in town as far as integrity was concerned. But it was my task to receive reports on suspected cases of plagiarism from everyone teaching second years in the degree, and I would meet with students and have those conversations and try to investigate and resolve cases. And that was quite a different system to the one we have now.
Mm.
And yeah, we didn't really talk about academic integrity then. It
Yeah.
was it was really just plagiarism.
Yeah, and it's still, I mean, I think we've done a lot of work worldwide. I think we've made a lot of progress in getting people to talk about academic integrity as a positive, affirmational thing. And still, right, when you ask people about it, it's, I'll routinely give presentations to students and I'll say, so what is academic integrity? And they'll say, not cheating, not plagiarizing, not lying, and it's so funny, but if you think about the International Center for Academic Integrity's fundamental values, right? Honesty, fairness, trust, respect, responsibility, courage. People feel those values viscerally, right? Like we've all violated them. We've all been dishonest. We've all been disrespectful. We've all felt other people be the anti of those things, but we've also felt the positive of those things. And so it's not so foreign, and yet it's taking it, I don't know if it's just in our societies, we like scandals and we like bad news, and that's all that gets in the newspaper. So you only hear about the bad stuff. You don't hear about the courageous people or the trustworthy people. it doesn't make the news. I don't know if that's what it is, but I do think we've made progress. And I think a lot of that is due to national organizations like in Ireland, and I said UK and Australia and New Zealand. So tell me a little bit more about the National Academic Integrity Network and the greater schema of the quality assurance process there, quality and
Mm.
standards, and what that collective action looks like and how did it come about and why?
Mm. Yeah, thanks. So I'll start off here, but Justin, please do feel free to pitch in. So the National Academic Integrity Network, NAIN for short, it was established in 2019. And I think it was quite visionary at the time. If you think in 2019, that was pre-COVID.
Yes.
So, and in our world and over here, COVID presented a real crisis for assessment as it did in other places as well. But to have kind of preempted that to a certain extent,
Mm,
sure there was a structure in place to kind of help steer that a little bit. So initially it was a collective of membership from Irish universities. So we call them traditional universities and then technological universities, which are kind of a newer form of universities. And there were membership from those groups as well as student unions, etc. Now the membership is slightly diversified, and we have membership from further education and training sector.
yeah.
So that might be individuals getting more vocational type qualifications, but of course you can get more other types of traditional
Mm,
qualifications as well. So and then we also have representation from other groups like regulators,
okay.
etc. as well. So not just narrowly educational institutions, any organization who feels they have a role in academic integrity.
So
So
like the
yeah,
organization that licensed pharmacists, for example, would they?
potentially
Okay.
professional regulators
Yeah. Okay.
can have contribute
Okay.
as well. So yeah, the quality and qualifications around, I suppose, have a separate mechanism to engage professional regulators and would very much feed out work there
Okay.
as well. So and so that brings us to, it sits under Quality and Qualifications Ireland, and
Yes.
they are responsible for quality assuring, programs of study, etc., and I suppose how programs of study operate within institutions. And they do have a reporting or mechanism there around academic integrity. But that, I suppose, is reporting is one thing that is just the very end of the line, isn't
Mm,
it? I suppose the NAIN network is nearly the soft or the guidance and support that can kind of feed into institutions so that when they do come to the reporting part, maybe that's not as onerous or a big an ask, or maybe there's not a gap there between what should be done and then what
yeah.
what is desirable. So that, I suppose, is generally structurally how it works, but very much practically speaking, it has individuals like myself, Justin, and our counterparts from other institutions. And we're very fortunate, myself and Justin, in that we are externally funded to take up our roles, and that funding has continued for the past few years. Other institutions either did not seek that funding or use that funding for other purposes. So these, individuals such as myself might sit within centres for teaching and learning, for
Right.
example, and have a more narrow focus on developing education resources or supporting policy development. So we're extremely fortunate. I think me and Justin do realize that with the kind of the fact that we can be solely dedicated to this, but others might be, combine it with a quality assurance role, for example. But essentially, we come together as a group. There might be 2 or 3 nominees from every institution, and we encourage a student nominee also, or a learner nominee. And it has a structure of a general membership and feeding into a steering committee. And I'm chair of that steering committee, and Justin is deputy chair. So very much, we are not removed from the task
Yeah.
at hand. Very much our day-to-day experiences and the feedback we get
Very
from our counterparts like directly
symbiotic.
feed into our thinking, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. And it so often is not the case, I suppose, when one functions at a national role, that you're also, got your sleeves rolled up and are actually
Yeah.
dealing with the day-to-day grittiness of the
Yeah.
thing as well. Yeah.
So there's some collective gathering of experiences and information to create guidance. Most of your stuff is guidance, not requirements, right? So you all came out with something about the artificial intelligence. There was some guidance for AI that came out. I think it was from Naine for QQI, which
Yes.
I found very helpful, and we looked at for our upcoming book with Zenith and Mary.
Oh,
Um,
brilliant.
yeah, and so that kind of guidance is great. It sounds like you are not unlike America and Canada in the sense of even though you have this central body and you have all of this guidance and all of this advice, and it sounds like your institutions have to report out to QQI on your academic integrity activities,
Hmm.
there's still diversity in terms of how you do that. So not everybody, not every university has a 100% person. You're called an academic integrity lead. Justin's called an academic integrity officer. So it's not like it's requiring you all to be alike and all institutions to behave exactly the same, but it's more of kind of maybe a minimum standard. Or Justin, how do you interpret that?
So, so I'll begin by saying that all of the universities in Ireland are publicly funded institutions,
Right.
and so there has always been a slight tension between the national advisory body, the Higher Education Authority, being able to dictate what
Mhm.
universities can do as publicly funded bodies, but
Yeah.
also preserving universities' autonomy as institutions.
Right.
And I think that's probably key to understanding some of the things that you have brought up there. So, I mean, in a small country like Ireland, it would be possible to have a governing body that could dictate
Yeah.
to a relatively small number of institutions about what to do. But I mean, I do think it is important that institutions are empowered to make their own local decisions
Hmm.
and preserve a degree of autonomy and independence in making decisions. So so this is, yeah, this would be a common type of approach that we would see here. I don't know if you would agree with that, Mary Claire, as a kind of a key reason for this type of approach.
Yeah, I think there is. I definitely think that it is to do with the public funding. And to some degree, there is homogeneity across the sector, but there has also been a recognition that institutions can and should be able to respond to the needs of their student population that they're serving, and the types of socio-demographic needs. For example, my university has amongst the highest deprivation levels of students entering into it. And so our priorities might be best placed elsewhere, or how we manage a particular learner group might be influenced by that. So I think there is a kind of a vision that there should be kind of a central idea or a consensus based approach, but recognizing the complexity that can even exist on such a small island. And some of that comes from, I suppose, the historical establishment of universities,
Hmm.
which dates back quite some time to when our British counterparts were influencing that to a large level, and who could and couldn't enter into
Right.
academic institutions. So it is a complicated thing, but I think based on my observation, I suppose it becomes quite complicated if one over regulates a particular structure and strips an academic institution of what they feel like is their autonomy.
Yeah.
Um, I think perhaps the learner might be the one to lose out there the most, actually.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. And I bring it up because I think when you talk over here in North America about more collective action, people get worried about that autonomy. And so I just wanted to highlight there's collective
Mm.
action
Mm.
and there's still
Yeah.
institutional autonomy, and
Yes.
both can coexist and they don't have to, they might be in tension sometimes, I think, to Justin's
Mhm.
point, but they're not in opposition.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
No.
I think sometimes I find myself craving for a more consistent kind
yeah,
of
makes
direction
things
from a
easier.
national authority so that you would have a degree of consistency
Yeah.
in certain things.
Yep.
So yeah, I
Mm.
agree. There is a
Yeah.
tension there.
I mean, I guess what I love about Ireland, at least you've all agreed that degree integrity is paramount. right? I keep reminding folks on this side of the pond, like we are not just in the business of facilitating learning, we're in the business of validating learning. And
Mm.
we have relegated that to behind other things like, but students want asynchronous online classes and they don't want to have to be forced to do a synchronous assessment. Like, well, yeah, but
And I
maybe
think
that's not a possible thing.
and I think there is a complex socio-cultural kind of reason for that as
Mm,
well, and that fortunately or unfortunately we export quite a lot of our graduates
yes.
temporarily as immigrants, and and I mean I think Ireland is internationally respected as having high kind of quality of qualifications, and I think there is an implicit recognition in everything we do that we are preparing our graduate for who knows what, maybe leaving this island. But similarly, we attract a lot of foreign direct
Yes.
investment and international companies. And in order to have a market of graduates who are able to take up those roles, there kind of is it's a commitment from universities to graduates that we will prepare you in the best possible way to
Yeah.
secure these jobs. So there is another kind of complex narrative going around the economy there as well, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, really, what better service can we do to students than validating their learning, right? So that
Absolutely.
they can be
Yeah.
sure they actually have the knowledge and skills they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so if there was a piece of advice you would give um, to folks who want to engage in more collective action around an important topic like academic integrity, you've been doing this for a while now. You've been trying to bring similar but different institutions together, especially as you've expanded and diversified
Mm.
who can be represented in the network. So, do you have any advice for folks?
Yeah. So I suppose from my position as chair, and we published our strategy, the name strategy that will last us until 2028.
Mm,
And thinking about how we would get that up and running and implemented and some energy behind it. I mean, we don't want a strategy to sit on the shelf.
right.
Really, our real power is around working groups, and we operate a working group structure to kind of lead out on implementing the objectives within our strategy. And so it's this kind of devolved power. Myself and Justin and the steering committee, with all the will in the world, just would not be able to deliver and have the impact that we
Right.
need to. So it's really recognizing individuals who are doing wonderful things in their field
Mhm.
and within institutions, and asking them to take up the mantle and lead out on working groups and take what we've written in strategy, but to make it their own and to define their objectives and define what success looks like to them. And I think a really wonderful example within one of our working groups is we have an individual who is within an academic institution as chair, but as deputy chair, we actually have the academic affairs president from our Student Union of Ireland. So
Ah,
very
great.
much a hand in hand. This is a kind of a flattened hierarchy, as it were.
Yeah.
You tell us how we're going to run this. And obviously there is, I suppose, that takes a commitment from those individuals to lead out on something. But again, they can directly see having an output or producing a resource is of use to them within their own practice. So it's nearly kind of like a nice little feedback pathway that actually it goes
Yeah.
around in quite a positive way. Justin, I'll hand over to you, but I think we've had that experience directly within our roles. We kind
Yes.
of see gaps and we say we need to do something about this, and that feeds
Yeah.
into working groups ourselves. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that structure is really important and really effective for delivering on some of the formal strategic goals of the organization. What sprang to mind when you asked the question though, Tricia, was the polar opposite, actually, the informal aspects of Nain and of the
mhm.
the people who make up Nain. So very early on in the org, well, actually after I took the role on in Galway and others were employed around the same time in Ireland, we started up an informal network
Ah,
of people working in academic integrity
hmm.
jobs in Ireland that continues to meet monthly to this day. And that has been just enormously valuable for me to get to know practices and conventions all over other institutions in the country. It's also been really helpful in not feeling so alone
Yeah,
sometimes. Myself and my colleague Michael
right.
are two people
Yep.
out of, more than 20,000 students and 2,500 staff, and sometimes feels like the job we have is all encompassing and just too big to even contemplate. So
Yeah.
it's really, really helpful to be able to talk to counterparts in other institutions and hear how they're doing things. What successes they've had, what failures they've had, what
Hmm.
encouragements they've had. So that monthly meeting has been like a pole star
Yeah.
for
And
me
that's
in this job.
And I guess that's what I'm jealous of. So, we have the International Center for Academic Integrity, but unlike over there, and Canada's doing a better job of this at this point. They do have more academic integrity folks at universities in Canada than we do in the States. You don't even have those counterparts at other universities necessarily to do this job, right?
Mm,
So it's difficult to get a movement going. So when
mm,
you're thinking about the next steps for academic integrity in Ireland, especially in the age of AI, with these agents like Perplexity Comet that can just complete any asynchronous unsupervised assessment, what are you all talking about? What's your, you mentioned this 2028 strategy, which maybe we could link to from the show notes, but give us some vision of what you think you're going to be doing over the next few years and what challenges you think the universities are going to be facing.
yeah. So we certainly have kind of a body of work that we have planned. For example, myself and Justin are leading out with colleagues on producing a guidance on what kinds of academic integrity roles and responsibilities might exist within institutions.
Nice.
So nearly providing a structure and a framework for colleagues and institutions out there to kind of align with,
Yep.
hopefully. But I suppose most recently what's come into our ether is a publication from the Higher Education Authority in Ireland, which is an AI policy framework.
Yep.
So essentially, it's a framework directed at universities to structure their approach to AI. Now, it relates to academic integrity, but multiple other domains as
Yeah.
well, like data governance, etc. And that was published just late December. Now, while there's, I suppose, not a regulatory or mandatory requirement just as yet, now that may well come, I think we are kind of digesting that as a network. And based on this directive or set of very strong recommendations that have come out, what is it now we need to do to fill the gap? And again, this kind of comes from our place as a supportive network, as a place to collaborate and do some of that heavy lifting. So,
Yeah.
for example, there is some statements within that framework around the requirement for oral assessment, and we're kind of looking at that, thinking, how can we help our membership
Yeah.
to meet the recommendation that is here, but also to
Mhm.
uphold good academic practice in that regard. So I think we're just beginning to get our head around. I think a lot of the recommendations within that we're happily doing quite well on already, having a pre-established set of guidance, but I think that will really focus our minds quite a bit in the next little while, and I think there'll be more work to come out in that space.
Mhm.
I'm not saying, by no means do our universities and other institutions have it solved when it comes to AI. I think what we
Darn.
have got,
I was hoping for
yeah,
the answer,
I
the
wish
solution.
I wish I could come here and say, "Look, we've
Uh,
got it all figured
well,
out
never
here,"
mind
but
then.
no,
No.
sadly not. But I think what we have is a kind of a mechanism to
Yeah.
respond very quickly to either calls from folks on the ground or from national requirements such as these to start filling in some of those gaps. Justin, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, the HEA framework on generative AI was
Mhm.
what I thought of instantly when Tricia
Mm,
posed this question. And like you say, Mary Claire, a lot of the recommendations that it makes, a lot of universities are already doing them or doing some variant of them to some degree. But I think what it recommends is in total very very comprehensive and touches on a whole lot of different areas of universities.
Mhm.
And so implementing it in full will be a real challenge, and it's something that universities, not just those of us working in academic integrity, do need to come to grips with, and soon, I think,
Yeah.
because I think perhaps one of the areas that would benefit from a little bit more consistency from the higher education authority, or at a national level, is just greater consistency in things like how we present the use of AI to students, how we monitor it or do not monitor it, how we report on instances of misconduct, because I think a lot of the public discourse about generative AI is very firmly focused on cheating.
Hmm.
And there have been news articles in Ireland in the last few weeks about this. And I think it would be a really good opportunity for universities to acknowledge this in a little more transparent way, and say, yes, this is a challenge. Here's why it's consequential for higher education,
Yeah.
but here are the really active steps that we're taking to address this, and it's everyone's responsibility. So it is learners, but it is also university administrators, lecturers as well. Just to, I think, just move the focus of that conversation away from the sole focus on the negatives, on cheating.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I have to admit, so in every and we'll wrap up with this question, and it's a hard one that I didn't tell you I was going to give you. So I start most of my keynotes, or I have all of my keynotes now, with a disclosure that I'm a hopeful pessimist when it comes to AI in education. And I always say I'm a pessimist because the companies didn't design these products for teaching and learning. In fact, many of these products do the opposite of what we need for a good teaching and learning environment. But I'm hopeful because we all have agency as a collective or as individuals. Students have agency not to use them inappropriately. Institutions have agency in how we teach students how to use them, or when we prohibit the use of them. So I would like each of you, maybe, I would like each of you to tell me what you're hopeful about in terms of teaching for integrity in the age of AI, and what you're pessimistic about. And pessimistic doesn't mean that you're doomsday, just you're critical, you're questioning, and hopeful means like you think we have some agency around something. So we can start with whoever wants to go in with whichever side, but I think we do like, if the first person chooses pessimism, the other one does their pessimism and then hope, or vice versa.
I mean,
Justin, we share notes.
I can start with something I'm hopeful about is the the increasing degree to which I've encountered students in this academic year who are thinking more critically
Wow.
about generative AI use, and
Mhm.
about the detrimental effects that it is having on their learning, that it is having on the environment, that it is having on equality in
Yeah.
education.
Yep.
And so that has been a noticeable change
Yes.
in this academic year,
Yep.
and I love that, and
Yes.
I'm really really heartened to see that. And now, in being realistic, this is not majority of students that I encounter,
Yep.
or anything like that, but it has been a noticeable shift, and that gives
Yes.
me hope.
Agreed. Mary Claire, what's your hope?
Lovely, Justin. Um, so I like to think of myself as a cautious pragmatist
Yes.
usually in life. So I have to admit, when I started into my role, I was thinking of policing, shutting down, stopping. I was getting a lot of negative narrative from
Mm.
colleagues and the
Hmm.
media, etc. And I really was hopeless for the future. But that phrase, "the kids are all right," kind of comes
Hmm.
back into my head every now and
Yep.
then. And each generation, as we go through, eventually, either through, I suppose, exposure to other ways of doing things, or workplace, or whatever it is, it feeds back round to actually holding on to what are the things that we need to be the skills, knowledge, whatever that we need going forward in our lives. And that might be a slower realization in this
Mm,
context. There needs to be a little bit of a writing that needs to take place to rebalance this. And I think I pessimistically, I think this is going to take a decade to sort out to find a new equilibrium of how we proceed here, both academically from an assessment viewpoint, but also for individuals to understand an ethical way to interact with AI,
yeah.
and that is going to take some time to sort out. So I suppose in answer to your question, I am hopeful, but maybe in a longer term picture, as I think people begin to recognize the detriment and damage that can happen, much like we are now beginning to see with social media.
I was just going to say, it
And
took us
it's
a long time with social
taken some
media.
time. And that's human nature, I think. It's like, what's the easy option? And then we realize maybe the easy option isn't
Oops.
actually the
Yeah.
best thing to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think we have learned a lot from social media and applying it to AI because we quickly started talking about friction and how eliminating friction from learning is not necessarily a good thing. And so I do hope that that has lent us some lessons. And I think to your point, Justin, the kids have learned that social media has been bad for them and they're kind of seeing this similar impacts of AI. So and what are you pessimistic about, Justin?
Um, well, leading on from my initial point, I would be slightly pessimistic about the unevenness that may
Yeah.
result from a portion of the learning population feeling
Yeah.
that way and another portion not feeling that way,
Yeah.
and the inequalities that might arise from that. I'm also pessimistic. I won't have a lengthy list. I am pessimistic about several
Maybe
things.
we should have ended on the hope one.
But your point, you touched on ed tech companies as well, not always having our best, not often or
Yes.
ever having our best interests at heart. So I'm pessimistic about techno feudalism
Yes.
and the degree to which ed tech companies are so embedded in all aspects of
Yes.
university life, and um, and the difficulty with which we the difficulty we would face in extricating ourselves from those
Yes.
routines, from those systems, even if we wanted to. I mean,
Yes.
it functions, I think, in a similar way to the social media addiction cycle. It's getting higher education
Yep.
hooked on systems that appear to make one's life easier at the start and maybe do for a little while, but then you're just tied into
Yeah.
them, for better or worse, for a long time because of contracts
Yep.
and procurement and issues
Justin, the
like
term
that.
I learned for that, I learned from a podcast called Your Undivided Attention, and it's called intentional entanglement. And
Mm,
companies have been doing that for a long time.
Mm,
In our case, it's AI is here. We give it away free to all the students, so then we can say AI is here. Your students are using it anyways. So,
mm,
you're going to have to figure this out. So let's end on a one hopeful note, which is what I tend to put into some of my presentations as well. There's a little organization over here in the States called Young Futures. And it's a bunch of kids that are figuring out solutions to problems, like attention. So one of the apps that one of them developed is one I remember. It's called Look Up. So if you all subscribe to it and you're in, like, say we were physically together and we all subscribe to this Look Up app, our phones would kind of buzz and come up on the screen like look up and remind kids to put their phones down and engage with the other humans that are in their proximity. So it's cool things like that that they're doing, that
mm,
gives me great hope, Justin, to your
mm.
point about the students becoming more aware of this, I think, than some adults in their lives. So thank you very much, to both of you, Mary Claire and Justin, for coming on the Opposite of Cheating podcast.
Thank you,
thank you,
Tricia. Lovely
Tricia.
to be here.